Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel for another Hot Toys Star Wars The Mandalorian 1/6 scale vehicle unboxing and review. Now today we're taking a look at none other than the Swoop Bike. I happen to really like the Swoop Bike, so yeah, pretty darn excited to get this out here and fully assembled. Now I got mine from toyswonderland.com. Link for that is in the description below. They do have installment plans and a reward system. While you're down in the description, why not hit that subscribe, bell notification icon and join button so you're notified as soon as a brand new review goes live on the channel. As for the box art, it's pretty much the usual Star Wars style, except it's been supersized because it needs to fit the Swoop Bike. It's a pretty hefty vehicle. Front and center, an image of said Swoop Bike with little baby Grogu. Down below, the wraparound banner in orange to represent the Mandalorian. On the side of the box, one more product shot, but this time, hey, it's Beskar Mando. On the back of the box, we do have all of the warnings and legal info. Now, when this was announced, I could have sworn Hot Toys announced some special pack with Mando included, but no, it turns out Mando is very clearly sold separately, although I wouldn't blame you if you thought he was included, because pretty much all of the blogger pics, and even this pic right here, shows Mando riding it. By the way, I really like that image. As for the Swoop Bike itself, like I said in the intro, there is some assembly required, and yeah, I will show you how to get that done. It doesn't look to be too complicated, and based off what we saw with the Return of the Jedi Scout Trooper and Speeder and the Mandalorian version, fingers crossed, it's pretty simple. First in-hand impressions are, yeah, it's a bunch of parts to make up your Swoop Bike. What we are going to do now, though, is get all of the parts and pieces laid out in the light box and take a closer look. Starting off with the display base first. Technically, yeah, we've seen this before with those aforementioned speeder bikes, but that works perfectly fine with me. This'll get the job done. Down below we've got some rocks and a bunch of texture, but this time it's painted in this sandy color to represent the sands of Tatooine. Up top we've got this dynamic flight pole. It's not massive, but it should give the illusion that the Swoop Bike is hovering. Up top we've got this hexagon peg for when you insert it into the Swoop Bike. Speak of the devil, here we have the Swoop Bike currently in multiple pieces. Now, yeah, technically we could check out the paint applications and the sculpt work here and now, but where's the fun in that? I want to assemble this thing first, and then we'll look at all of that stuff when it's one whole speeder. Hopefully you all don't get mad at me for using speeder and Swoop Bike interchangeably. I don't want to keep saying Swoop Bike 55 times throughout the course of the video, so yeah, I'm going to keep doing it. Now, it does come with two bags, one for either side. One is for Grogu, and one's just for stuff, I guess. They are padded, and they're made of real fabric, plus you got some sculpted pieces glued or sewn onto the front and the top. We have seen this Grogu before, but never quite in this configuration. This body is from the first Grogu with his arms sticking out so he could hold the Mando necklace, but this head sculpt isn't the one it came with originally. This head sculpt came with the Scout Trooper and the Speeder Bike, and it makes perfect sense here too, because if he's in the bag, yeah, his ears would be flowing up as the wind is hitting him. He is painted well enough with some skin texture and some speckling on the surface, as well as some pink highlights for the cheeks and the ears. The outfit is also really well textured, and there are some washes in the crevices, plus some dirt and grime for the fur collar. But it's not actually fur. Once again, it's all sculpted. Lastly, we do get some smaller pieces, a screw and some real metal rods, plus these kind of hook clips that go on the pedals. Enough beating around the bush though, I want to build this thing, so let's get that done. The first step is to combine the two halves of the speeder. Relatively simple. You slide this piece in and make sure you push it in all the way so it's seated nice and low. You then remove this top cap piece and bring in that super long screw from earlier. Unfortunately, Hot Toys don't include a screwdriver, and I don't know why. Usually with their die-cast Iron Man figures they do, but I guess they deemed the speeder unworthy. Now you bring this cap piece back in and look at that, it's a magnet, and now the screw is exposed so it pops on and sits in place magnetically. The next step is to install these metal rods into the armatures both at the front and back on both sides. It's pretty simple to do. You simply slide them in, and when they're correctly seated, they'll click in position. Like I said, the same thing on both sides. Push it in at the front first. In my opinion, that's the easiest way of getting it done. Then line it up at the back and push it in there as well. As far as I can tell, these pieces are universal, meaning they can go on either side. Doesn't really matter. You simply spread them apart and you can see some rectangular peg ports. You slide them in both on the inside and the outside around the pedals. Just like the metal rods, it's the same thing on both sides. You seat both of those pegs, then I found if you push them in with your fingernail or some kind of plastic tool, you can get them to sit in a little bit more flush. Lastly, we do have the bags on both sides, and yes, they attach with Velcro. Although there is a very specific way of doing this, so either watch really carefully to see the correct crevices that these slide into, or simply check the instructions. Now the side straps loop over around the other side, and you kind of tuck them up under themselves and Velcro them in position. Don't forget, you can adjust this all later, so if you want it to sit a specific way or slightly askew, you can mess with the Velcro and probably get that done. The bag on the left side is actually even more complicated. You'll slide in this top piece of Velcro, but you'll notice I haven't done it up just yet because we'll need some added flexibility. We'll then slide through this top strap, it'll come out the bottom. Grab it and twist it around and then Velcro it onto the main body of the bag. Around the back, do pretty much the exact same thing except on this strut. You'll slide it through, grab it, twist it around, and then Velcro it in position. Once again, all of this stuff can be adjusted, it's entirely up to you. And after you've done that, you can then grab the main strap and lock everything in place. I've honestly said bag way too many times, but if you want to pop Grogu in his bag, you will need to de-thread these buckles. Now this, once again, isn't the easiest thing in the world to do, and I wouldn't be surprised if you struggle to do them back up because the edges do look like they are going to fray just a little, but fingers crossed they don't. You can then open up the bag and bring in your preferred Grogu, either the one that comes in the set or an entirely different one, slot him in place and make sure you push him down all the way so his little hand is poking over the top. When it comes to installing the display base, it is pretty simple, but it is a hexagonal peg and towards the front of the peg is a point. That means when you install this rod, you do want to make sure it's in proper alignment, so when you push it in, it goes in all the way. When you do have it installed correctly, the Swoop Bike should be perfectly level. It shouldn't be leaning towards the front or the back. As you can see, it's plugged in all the way, and it's not going anywhere. Here we have it, floating in the light box. No crazy Grogus or Mandos or anything like that, but don't worry, they're definitely coming. I really like this thing. I was one of the most vocal detractors originally. I said, who wants this? It's a big hunk of plastic in the shape of a speeder. Yes, speeders are cool, but I don't know who has the real estate. I, for one, didn't think I could fit this in the display. But now that I've seen it, now that I've held it, it starts to make a lot more sense. This thing is stunning. It's quite sizable, yes, but it's not super wide, so it could potentially find a way into the back of your collection. I do like the way it floats on its display base, and it's painted masterfully. From a distance, you can tell it looks quite filthy, and that's one of my favorite things about Star Wars. It's a lived-in universe, nothing is pristine and brand new, everything tells a story, including this Swoop Bike. Up close and personal, kicking things off with the front of the Swoop Bike first, it looks really good. It looks very thin and dainty, maybe a little bit fragile, but It doesn't feel that way, it feels nice and sturdy. You do have a decent level of dirt and grime pretty much all over. You've got speckling, you've got windburn, you've got paint chipping, you've got rusty sections like up here. Overall, yeah, this thing's pretty filthy. You can also rotate this front piece, and multiple pieces move. I wasn't really expecting that. I thought this would be pretty static, but yeah, it absolutely can. When you move this front piece, these panels will move left and right because they're now connected by those metal struts that we attached earlier. That also means these pistons will move a little bit as well. Now, they could potentially pop out, but popping out is a lot better than those breaking. So I'm glad they're made of metal and those connections aren't overly secure. It's not to say that anything is too flimsy, I just would prefer it pop out rather than breaking. Now you do have these thin plastic armatures that do hold on the pedals, and yes, those pedals are articulated, but if you're going to move them, I would suggest holding it down here right below the joint and then moving it to minimize flexing. You also have a ton more scratching and chipping on the body. There's a lot of texture on the seat, and no, that's not fabric, it's all sculpted with texture and the stitching. Something that's definitely going to help when trying to pop Mando onto the Swoop Bike is these pieces are articulated up and down, quite a lot actually. Then the handles themselves can move forward and back, although these cables and these armatures do feel a little flimsy, so I know I've already said it, but please, be careful. You then have these engine sections on both sides, and yes, they are suitably filthy. Then around the back, the bags we attached earlier, one with baby Grogu, and on the other side, it's closed for now, but you could probably open that up and pop something in. On the underside, there's a ton more paint because this thing would have been scooting along the sands of Tatooine, getting sandblasted and windburnt, and once again, it's completely disheveled. We've got paint that's been scuffed off to reveal the bare metal underneath. Nothing here is actually metal except for those struts. This is pretty much made entirely of plastic. Now, it feels nice and substantial, but it's not too heavy, so when you plug it into the display base using this peg port, fingers crossed it shouldn't lean. Now you do have a seam line down the middle. For some reason it's really obvious back here, but not so obvious at the front. It's unfortunate, but it's on the bottom, so it's not super visible. This, however, it's a visible screw. Why? Hot Toys, you went to the effort of making this thing pretty much entirely seamless with no visible screws except for this one. As I said, kind of unfortunate. A quick note on Grogu, when you do slide him into the bag, these pieces aren't wired, nor is the top cover, so you kind of either have it just sitting over his head looking kind of weird, or you slide it all the way back. I personally think that's the best option, is to slide it back and kind of push it down, so you reveal a lot more of Grogu. You may be wondering if you can use the original Grogu with this Swoop Bike, and yes, of course you can. He does, after all, have the exact same body, so of course he fits in the bag. Now, I personally do like the one with the ears swooshing up, because of course the Swoop Bike would be speeding along and Grogu's ears will be flapping in the wind, but maybe the Swoop Bike is parked and Mando is just leaning alongside it. Yeah, you can pop this one in, and that should work in the display. In order to pop Mando on the Swoop Bike, you're going to have to do a pose kinda like this, and it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. Because there is so much padding in the legs and the upper torso, yeah, you're going to be fighting him, but if you have him at a bit of an angle because of the weird shape of the Swoop Bike, bend the knees almost to 90, then tilt the ankles forward, you should have a good shot of getting him on there. But that's not all, you'll also have to adjust the position of the pedals and these handlebars and the handles themselves, getting them to kind of accommodate Mando as much as you're getting Mando to accommodate the Swoop Bike. It's not easy to do, but it can totally be done. Here we have Beskar Mando and little baby Grogu on the Swoop Bike, and this looks really cool. At the start, I didn't know where this was going to go. I would have told you that, yeah, I'm gonna pop it in storage, I'll review it because folks really want to see it, but I don't have space for this darn thing. Turns out though, I'm gonna have to find space cause the presence is undeniable. Now I did have to crunch Mando slightly further forward, bit of a posing tip for you when you're trying to replicate a character doing something specific from the show. Save yourself the hassle, bring up a picture of that character doing that thing from the show and then copy the pose accordingly. Now this would have been helped by removing the fat suit from Mando cause it was a bit of a chore to get him crunched further forward, but if you kill the fat suit, check out Posing with Peter's tutorial for doing just that. I'm sure it'll be a little bit easier. The other thing that would sell this pose and having Mando on top mid-flight or mid-swooping, I guess, would be a wired cape. Now we are getting a wired cape in the future, but for now, with your current Mandos, we don't really have one. Luckily, I picked up a custom one, so I can give you a little bit of a taste of what that looks like later in the video. If you're someone like me who straight up prefers the look of Durasteel Mando and you want to pop him on your Swoop bike and you're wondering if he's compatible, well, Swoop, there it is. I am so sorry I had to. Yes, he's compatible. He has the same body as Beskar Mando, the same padding, so you're going to run into the same hurdles. Maybe the fat suit mod is for you, or maybe you have the 2.0 version of Durasteel Mando that came with the blurg. He should sit on this a little bit easier. You can also slot the Amber Phase pulse rifle down the side of the Swoop bike, and surprisingly, it sits there. It doesn't want to fall off. It's relatively secure, but I don't know if it's really meant to do that. The instructions don't specifically mention it. For a quick side-by-side comparison, here we have my Hot Toys Beskar Mando, and as you can see, the Swoop bike is huge. It's really long, it's relatively tall, it comes up to around the bottom of Mando's chest plate, so if you're thinking, can I fit this in the display? Hopefully this comparison helps. Next up, for a slightly different angle than usual, here we have a top-down comparison. Up front, we've got the Mandalorian version of the Scout Trooper speeder bike in white, and up the back, the Swoop bike. And as you can see, or I'm not sure if you actually can, but the Swoop bike is ever so slightly longer. It is, however, a lot narrower. Not that that makes a huge difference, cause the base is kinda what sets the footprint anyway, and it's the same base between both speeders. Wrapping up on Hot Toys Mandalorian Swoop bike in 1/6 scale. Now, there's one big question looming large over this review. Is this an essential pickup? Well, that kinda depends on you. If you have the space, then yes, absolutely. If you have the funds, also yes, go ahead and grab it. And if you love the Mandalorian, then you may as well find the space and procure the funds, cause you're gonna want this Swoop bike. However, if you answered no to any one or all of those questions, simply skip. This isn't for you. It's a big hunk of plastic, it takes up a ton of space in the display, and if you have Mando on top of it, you could potentially do some damage to the figure, cause having to wrangle him into a Swoop bike riding position, I reckon it's putting a lot of stress on the joints underneath the fat suit. Who knows, maybe the Chrome Mando will be better articulated with less padding, but only time will tell. For now, it's a downright challenge getting Mando on the bike. When you do though, it looks incredible. He sits on it really well, he has a firm grip on the handles, stuff moves out of his way that allows him to sit on there a little bit more securely. And when you do pair him up with the bike, it opens up a whole host of new posing possibilities that weren't possible if you didn't have the Swoop bike and Grogu and Mando. It's not an essential pickup, but if you can fit it in, it's well worth getting. Now, I got mine from toyswonderland.com. Link for that is in the description below. They do have installment plans and a reward system. While you're down there, why not hit that subscribe, bell notification icon, and join button if you like the sound of seeing your name in the end credits of my reviews. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next video.